Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the twisted ladder of your genetic code, where reality gets stranger than any science fiction you've ever dozed off to. Picture this, you're lying there right now, completely unaware that inside every single cell of your body, there's a microscopic library containing instructions more complex than the entire internet. And you probably won't survive learning what scientists have been hiding about the other 10 strands of DNA they claim don't exist. You see, while you've been told your whole life that DNA is just a simple double helix 2 strands twisted together like a cosmic rope ladder, there's a growing movement of researchers, spiritual scientists, and consciousness explorers who insist we're missing the bigger picture. They claim that what mainstream science calls junk DNA isn't junk at all, but rather dormant strands waiting to be activated. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment below with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing this global community of night owls and insomniacs gathering from every corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle back into your pillow, and somewhere in the darkness of your cells, billions of microscopic machines are humming away, reading the same genetic script that's been passed down through countless generations. But here's where things get interesting and slightly unsettling. In 1953, when James Watson and Francis Crick first mapped the structure of DNA, they were looking at what we now know was just the tip of the iceberg. The double helix they discovered was revolutionary, sure, but imagine if you found a massive library and only bothered to read 2 books, then declared you understood the entire collection. That's essentially what happened with DNA research for decades. Scientists identified the coding regions, the parts that directly create proteins, dismissed the rest as evolutionary leftovers, biological trash that accumulated over millions of years. But you know what they say about one person's trash being another's treasure. Recent discoveries have shown that this so-called junk DNA makes up about 98% of your genome, and it's anything but useless. It's like finding out that the quiet kid in class who never spoke was actually running a secret intelligence network the whole time. Historians still argue whether the dismissal of not coding DNA was scientific arrogance or simply the limitations of 1950s technology. But one thing's becoming clear. We've been walking around with a biological supercomputer, and we've only been using it as a calculator. Asterisk, you drift deeper into this genetic mystery, and your mind begins to wander through the labyrinthine corridors of cellular memory. Think about it, every ancestor you've ever had, stretching back millions of years, has contributed something to the genetic soup swimming in your cells. Right now, you're carrying around DNA from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and probably a few other extinct human cousins. We haven't even discovered yet the 12-strand DNA. Theory suggests that these additional strands aren't physical in the traditional sense. They're energetic, vibrational, existing in dimensions that our current scientific instruments can barely detect. It's like trying to measure a symphony with a ruler. You're using the wrong tool for the job entirely. Picture yourself as a radio that's been stuck on AM your whole life, picking up only the most basic signals when you're actually capable of receiving FM, shortwave, satellite, and frequencies that don't even have names yet. Those 10 dormant strands, they're supposedly your cosmic antenna array, just waiting for the right conditions to come online. Now, before you start thinking this is all New Age nonsense, consider this. Quantum physics has already shown us that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously. That observation changes reality, and that everything in the universe is connected through invisible threads of energy. Is it really such a stretch to imagine that our DNA might operate on similar principles? The ancient Egyptians, those masters of consciousness and builders of impossible monuments, seemed to understand something about human potential that we've forgotten. They spoke of activating dormant abilities, of unlocking the full capacity of the human mind and spirit. Historians still argue whether their advanced knowledge came from lost civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, or simply a deeper understanding of consciousness itself. You can almost feel it now, can't you? That subtle tingling sensation as your body relaxes and your mind opens to possibilities beyond the mundane. Maybe it's just the power of suggestion, or maybe something deeper is stirring in the quantum soup of your cells. Asterisk as you sink further into this genetic reverie. Let's talk about what these additional DNA strands are supposed to do. According to 12-strand DNA theorists, each strand corresponds to a different aspect of human consciousness and ability. The third and fourth strands allegedly govern emotional intelligence and psychic sensitivity, your ability to read energy, sense what others are feeling, and navigate the invisible currents of human interaction. Think about those moments when you just know something without knowing how you know it. When you think of someone right before they call, or when you get a gut feeling about a situation that turns out to be absolutely right. Traditional science explains this as pattern recognition, subconscious processing, or simple coincidence. But what if it's actually your dormant DNA strands flickering to life for brief moments? The fifth and sixth strands supposedly relate to communication, not just with other humans, but with the broader web of consciousness that connects all living things. Indigenous cultures around the world have always spoken of being able to communicate with animals, plants, and even the land itself. We've dismissed this as primitive superstition, but recent research in plant consciousness and animal communication suggests we might have been a bit hasty in our judgment. Here's a fun fact that'll make you question everything. Trees in a forest actually communicate with each other through underground networks of fungi, sharing nutrients, warning about dangers, and even caring for their offspring. It's like a botanical internet that's been running for millions of years while we were still figuring out how to make fire. Makes you wonder what other forms of communication we've been blind to, doesn't it? The seventh and eighth strands are said to govern creativity and manifestation, your ability to turn thoughts into reality, to shape the world around you through focused intention. Artists and inventors throughout history have described moments of inspiration that seemed to come from somewhere beyond their conscious minds, as if they were tapping into a universal source of creativity. Historians still argue whether genius is born or made, but maybe the real question is whether it's activated or dormant. You're floating now in this sea of genetic possibility, and your breathing has settled into that perfect rhythm of deep relaxation. Let's explore the more esoteric aspects of this 12-strand theory, because things are about to get wonderfully weird. The 9th and 10th strands allegedly connect you to what some call the Akashic Records, a cosmic database containing every thought, emotion, and experience that has ever occurred. It sounds like science fiction, But consider this. If consciousness is fundamental to the universe, as many quantum physicists now suggest, then maybe information really is stored in the fabric of reality itself. You know how sometimes you have dreams that feel more real than reality, dreams where you're speaking languages you don't know, living in places you've never been, or possessing knowledge that seems to come from nowhere? 12-strand theorists would say you're accessing genetic memories, tapping into the experiences of your ancestors through activated DNA. The 11th strand supposedly governs your connection to higher dimensions of consciousness, those realms that mystics and shamans have been exploring for millennia through meditation, plant medicines, and other consciousness-altering practices. Modern neuroscience has actually identified specific brain states associated with transcendent experiences, suggesting that these altered states of consciousness might be more than just hallucinations or wishful thinking. And the 12th strand, that's your direct connection to what some call Source, God, the universe, or whatever name you prefer for the creative force behind existence. It's your cosmic Wi-Fi password, your VIP access to the ultimate reality that underlies all the apparent chaos and complexity of life. Now, here's where things get deliciously ironic. While New Age practitioners are talking about activating these mystical DNA strands, MAINSTREAM, scientists are discovering that our junk DNA contains regulatory sequences that control gene expression in ways we're only beginning to understand. It's like the universe is playing an elaborate joke on both camps. The spiritual seekers and the hardcore materialists are both right, just using different languages to describe the same phenomenon. Historians still argue whether ancient wisdom traditions were based on primitive superstition or sophisticated understanding of consciousness. But maybe the real question is whether we've been looking at the evidence with the right eyes. Asterisk, your eyelids are getting heavier now, and in this drowsy state, the boundaries between science and spirituality begin to blur like watercolors in the rain. Let's dive into the practical side of this 12-strand DNA activation, because apparently you don't just sit around waiting for cosmic lightning to strike your genetic code. According to the practitioners of this art, and yes, they consider it an art rather than a science, activation begins with intention. You literally have to ask your DNA to wake up, like gently nudging a sleeping friend. It sounds absurd until you remember that your thoughts are actually electrochemical events that influence every cell in your body. The placebo effect alone demonstrates that belief can trigger real, measurable biological changes. The first step, they say, is meditation, not the kind where you're desperately trying to stop thinking, good luck with that, but the gentle, observational kind where you simply watch your thoughts like clouds drifting across the sky of your consciousness. In this state, you're supposedly creating the optimal conditions for your dormant DNA to begin stirring. Sound therapy is another big component. Specific frequencies, particularly 528 Hz, which some call the love frequency, are believed to resonate with DNA and promote healing and activation. Whether this works through actual vibrational resonance or simply by inducing relaxed brain states is still up for debate. But the fact remains that sound has been used for healing and consciousness alteration in every culture throughout history. Here's a quirky tidbit that'll make you smile. The frequency 528 Hz is also found in the buzzing of bees, the purring of cats, and the sound of ocean waves. Nature seems to have a preference for this particular vibration, which makes you wonder if there's something more to it than just wishful thinking. Ancient Egyptians used sound chambers in their pyramids. Tibetan monks have their singing bowls, and even modern hospitals are beginning to use sound therapy for healing. Historians still argue whether these practices work through measurable physical mechanisms or purely psychological effects. But does it really matter if the results are the same? Asterisk, you're drifting deeper now, and your body feels like it's melting into the mattress as we explore the more controversial aspects of DNA activation. Some theorists claim that certain bloodlines carry more active strands than others that some families have maintained. Genetic lineages that preserve these dormant capabilities across generations. This gets into some uncomfortable territory, because it sounds dangerously close to the kind of genetic superiority nonsense that has caused so much suffering throughout history. But the 12-strand theorists insist it's not about being better than others, it's about different people having different roles in humanity's collective evolution. Think of it like a cosmic orchestra where some people are violins, others are drums, and still others are the conductor. Each instrument is essential, but they all contribute different elements to the overall symphony. Maybe some genetic lineages are naturally more attuned to psychic abilities, while others excel at healing, creativity, or leadership. The indigo children phenomenon of the 1990s was supposedly an example of this kids being born with more active DNA strands, displaying unusual abilities, heightened sensitivity, and an intuitive understanding of technology and consciousness. Whether you buy into that or not, there's no denying that each generation seems to adapt more quickly to new technologies and ways of thinking. Here's something that'll make you chuckle. Researchers have discovered that people who grew up with video games actually have different brain structures than those who didn't. Their visual processing centers are more developed, their hand-eye coordination is enhanced, and they can track multiple objects simultaneously with greater accuracy. So maybe our DNA really is evolving in response to our environment, just not in the mystical way the 12-strand theorists suggest. Ancient bloodlines, royal families, and indigenous shamanic traditions have always claimed to carry special genetic gifts. Historians still argue whether these claims represent actual biological differences or simply cultural traditions that preserve certain knowledge and practices across generations. Your breathing has slowed to that perfect rhythm of deep relaxation, and in this state, let's explore one of the most fascinating aspects of the 12-strand theory, the idea that DNA activation is connected to the Earth's electromagnetic field and cosmic cycles. The Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic frequency of our planet, has been increasing over the past few decades, rising from its traditional 7.83 Hz to peaks of 16 to 17 Hz, and sometimes higher. Some researchers suggest this is connected to climate change and solar activity, while 12-strand theorists claim it's actually triggering mass DNA activation across the human population. You know how some people seem more sensitive to weather changes, full moons, or solar flares? Maybe they're not just being dramatic. Maybe their DNA is actually responding to these electromagnetic fluctuations, like a biological antenna picking up cosmic broadcasts. The ancient Maya, those mathematical geniuses who calculated celestial cycles with stunning accuracy, believed that human consciousness evolves in response to cosmic influences. Their calendar system wasn't just about tracking time, it was about mapping the relationship between celestial events and human development. The famous 2012 date wasn't supposed to be the end of the world, but rather the beginning of a new phase of human consciousness. Here's a delightfully weird fact. Your DNA actually emits biophotons, tiny particles of light that scientists can measure with sensitive equipment. Russian researcher Peter Guriev discovered that DNA molecules can store and transmit information through light patterns, essentially turning your genetic code into a biological laser system. Whether this has anything to do with the 12th theory is anyone's guess, but it certainly adds a scientific twist to the idea of light activation. Solar activity, lunar cycles, and planetary alignments have been correlated with everything from stock market fluctuations to hospital admission rates. Historians still argue whether these correlations represent actual causal relationships or simply the human tendency to find patterns in random data, but the correlations persist across cultures and centuries. Asterisk, you're floating in that perfect space between waking and sleeping now, where impossible things seem perfectly reasonable and the ordinary world feels like a distant memory. Let's delve into the role of diet and lifestyle in DNA activation, because apparently you can't just meditate your way to genetic enlightenment, you have to eat your vegetables too. 12-strand practitioners emphasize the importance of high vibrational foods, organic fruits and vegetables, pure water, and avoiding processed foods that supposedly lower your energetic frequency. While the vibrational aspect might sound like pseudoscience, there's actually solid research showing that diet directly affects gene expression through epigenetic mechanisms. Epigenetics, the study of how environmental factors influence gene activity, has revolutionized our understanding of heredity. Your lifestyle choices don't just affect you, they can actually alter which genes are active in your children and grandchildren. It's like your DNA is constantly rewriting itself based on the information it receives from your environment. Fasting, another practice recommended for DNA activation, has been shown to trigger autophagy, a cellular cleanup process that removes damaged components and promotes regeneration. Ancient spiritual traditions have used fasting for consciousness expansion for millennia, and now we're discovering the biological mechanisms that might explain why it works. Here's something that'll make you appreciate your ancestors. Traditional fermented foods like kimchi, kefir, and sauerkraut contain probiotics that directly influence brain function through the gut-brain axis. Your intestinal bacteria are literally communicating with your neurons, affecting your mood, cognition, and possibly even your spiritual experiences. Maybe those ancient fermentation practices were more sophisticated than we realized. The pineal gland, that tiny pine cone-shaped structure in your brain, is particularly important in 12-strand theory. It produces melatonin and DMT, regulates circadian rhythms, and has been called the seat of the soul by philosophers throughout history. Fluoride, chlorine, and other chemicals in modern water supplies can calcify the pineal gland, potentially reducing its function. Historians still argue whether ancient water purification practices were based on hygiene concerns or deeper understanding of consciousness, but the correlation between clean water and spiritual clarity appears across cultures worldwide. Asterisk, your consciousness is drifting now like a leaf on a gentle stream, and in this peaceful state, let's explore the connection between DNA activation and what researchers call morphic resonance, the idea that information can be transmitted across space and time through invisible fields of influence. Biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposed that once a certain number of individuals learn something new, that knowledge becomes available to the entire species through morphic fields. It's like a biological internet that operates outside the normal channels of communication. The famous 100th monkey phenomenon supposedly demonstrates this principle when enough monkeys on one island learned to wash their food. Monkeys on distant islands spontaneously began doing the same thing. If morphic resonance is real, then DNA activation might be contagious in the most wonderful way. As more people activate their dormant strands, it becomes easier for others to do the same, creating a cascade effect that could transform human consciousness on a global scale. The concept of collective consciousness isn't new. Carl Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, and indigenous cultures have always spoken of the interconnectedness of all minds. Modern neuroscience has discovered mirror neurons that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe others performing the same action, suggesting that our brains are naturally wired for empathic connection. Here's a fascinating tidbit that bridges science and mysticism. Quantum entanglement shows that particles can remain connected across vast distances, instantly affecting each other regardless of the space between them. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but it's now a proven phenomenon that forms the basis of quantum computing and cryptography. Maybe consciousness operates on similar principles. Maybe when you activate your DNA, you're not just changing yourself, you're contributing to a field of activated awareness that makes it easier for everyone else to access their full potential. Ancient mystery schools and spiritual traditions often spoke of initiation, the process of awakening dormant human capacities through specific practices and experiences. Historians still argue whether these initiations were psychological transformations or actual biological activations, but the consistent reports across cultures suggest something real was happening. You're sinking deeper into this ocean of possibility, your body completely relaxed and your mind open to the strange and wonderful. Let's explore the role of crystals and sacred geometry in DNA activation, because apparently your genetic code has an aesthetic sense and responds to beautiful patterns. 12-strand. Theorists claim that certain crystals can amplify and focus the energies needed for DNA activation. Quartz crystals, with their precise molecular structure and piezoelectric properties, are particularly favored. While skeptics dismiss this as magical thinking, it's worth noting that quartz crystals are essential components in modern electronics, computers, and communication devices because of their ability to store and transmit information. Sacred geometry, those perfect mathematical patterns found throughout nature, supposedly provides a template for DNA activation. The golden ratio, Fibonacci spirals, and platonic solids appear everywhere, from flower petals to galaxy formations, suggesting that the universe itself operates according to geometric principles. Your DNA molecule actually forms a perfect double helix with specific geometric proportions. The distance between base pairs, the angle of the twist, and the overall structure follow mathematical relationships that would make any architect jealous. Maybe the 12-strand theorists are onto something when they say that exposing yourself to perfect geometric patterns can influence your genetic structure. Here's something that'll make you smile. Researchers have discovered that plants grow better when exposed to classical music, particularly pieces with mathematical structure like Bach's compositions. The plants seem to respond to the geometric relationships in the music, growing more vibrantly and producing more fruit. If plants can be influenced by mathematical harmony, why not human DNA? Crop circles, those mysterious patterns that appear overnight in fields around the world, often display incredibly complex geometric designs that would challenge any mathematician, whether they're created by humans, natural phenomena, or something more exotic. They demonstrate the profound human attraction to perfect patterns and symmetry. Ancient architects incorporated sacred geometry into temples, pyramids, and cathedrals worldwide. Historians still argue whether these structures were designed for acoustic properties, astronomical alignments, or consciousness-altering effects, but visitors consistently report feeling something special in these geometrically perfect spaces. Your eyelids are growing heavier with each breath, and in this twilight state between worlds, let's examine the connection between DNA activation and what some call timeline jumping, the ability to shift between different probable realities. Quantum physics tells us that reality exists in a state of probability until observed, and that parallel universes might branch off from every decision point. 12-strand theorists suggest that activated DNA allows you to consciously navigate between these probability streams, essentially choosing which version of reality you experience. This sounds like pure fantasy until you consider the research on consciousness and quantum mechanics. The observer effect demonstrates that conscious observation actually changes physical reality at the quantum level. If consciousness can influence matter at the smallest scales, maybe it can influence larger patterns as well. You've probably experienced moments that felt like reality hiccups when you could have sworn you left your keys in one place, but found them somewhere else, or when you remembered an event differently than everyone else. Maybe these aren't just memory glitches, but brief glimpses of alternate timelines bleeding through. The Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember historical events differently than recorded history, has become a cultural phenomenon. Whether it's the result of false memories, parallel universes, or timeline shifts is hotly debated. But the consistency of these shared false memories across unconnected individuals is intriguing. Here's a deliciously weird fact. Time dilation. Effects from Einstein's relativity mean that you're literally living in a slightly different time stream than someone at a different altitude, or moving at a different speed. GPS satellites have to account for these time differences to maintain accuracy. Maybe consciousness-based timeline jumping isn't so far-fetched after all. Ancient shamanic traditions have always included practices for walking between worlds, accessing alternate realities through altered states of consciousness. Historians still argue whether these were metaphorical journeys or actual interdimensional travel, but the detailed maps of non-ordinary reality that shamans have created across cultures show remarkable consistency. You're floating in that perfect state of relaxed awareness now, where the impossible seems perfectly natural and the boundaries of reality become beautifully fluid. Let's explore the connection between DNA activation and what researchers call spontaneous remission, those miraculous healings that conventional medicine can't explain. Throughout medical history, there have been documented cases of people recovering from terminal illnesses with no medical intervention, cancer disappearing overnight, paralyzed individuals suddenly walking, chronic conditions vanishing without explanation, while doctors typically attribute these to misdiagnosis or the placebo effect. 12-strand theorists suggest they represent moments of spontaneous DNA activation. Your body is constantly replacing itself. Every cell in your body is completely renewed every 7 to 10 years. You're literally not the same person you were a decade ago, at least not physically. If your DNA contains the blueprint for perfect health, then maybe activation involves remembering that original template and overriding the corrupted patterns that create disease. Epigenetic research has shown that trauma can be passed down through generations, but so can resilience and healing. Your ancestors' experiences of overcoming challenges are encoded in your genetic memory, waiting to be accessed when you need them most. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the power of belief. Studies of identical twins raised in different environments show that gene expression can vary dramatically based on lifestyle, stress levels, and even belief systems. Your thoughts and emotions are literally rewriting your genetic code in real time. The field of psychoneuroimmunology studies how mental states affect immune function, and the results are remarkable. Meditation, positive visualization, and emotional healing practices can measurably improve immune response, hormone balance, and cellular repair mechanisms. Ancient healing traditions from around the world, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, indigenous plant medicine practices will recognize the connection between consciousness and physical health. Historians still argue whether these systems work through placebo effects or actual biological mechanisms, but modern research is increasingly validating their effectiveness. Your breathing has settled into that deep, rhythmic pattern of profound relaxation, and in this state, let's explore one of the most intriguing aspects of 12-strand DNA theory, the idea that activation connects you to galactic consciousness and extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, before you start picturing little green men with probes, consider this. The chemical elements in your body were forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. You are literally made of stardust, carrying the memory of cosmic events that occurred long before Earth existed. Maybe the connection to galactic consciousness isn't about alien contact, but about remembering your cosmic origins. The Drake equation suggests that there should be millions of intelligent civilizations in our galaxy alone. Yet we haven't found definitive proof of any. 12-strand theorists propose that advanced civilizations communicate through consciousness rather than radio waves, and that DNA activation is essentially learning to tune into this galactic internet of awareness. Ancient cultures worldwide have remarkably similar stories about sky gods or star people who came to Earth and taught humanity various skills. Whether these represent actual extraterrestrial contact, archetypal memories, or metaphorical descriptions of consciousness evolution is hotly debated among historians and researchers. Here's a mind-bending fact. The human brain contains more neural connections than there are stars in the observable universe. Your consciousness is literally more complex than the cosmic web of galaxies stretching across space and time. Maybe the search for extraterrestrial intelligence should start with understanding the alien intelligence already residing in your own skull. Recent discoveries of potentially habitable exoplanets and organic molecules in space have increased the scientific community's openness to the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe. The James Webb Space Telescope is revealing cosmic structures and processes that challenge our understanding of how galaxies and solar systems form. SETI researchers are expanding their search beyond radio signals to include optical pulses, gravitational waves, and other exotic forms of communication, maybe they should also consider the possibility that advanced civilizations communicate through quantum consciousness fields that transcend space and time. Asterisk, you're drifting in that perfect space between dreams and waking now. Your consciousness expanded beyond the normal boundaries of self and time. Let's explore the ultimate promise of 12-strand DNA activation, the transformation of humanity into a new species altogether. Homo sapiens has only existed for about 300,000 years. Blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. We've gone from living in caves to exploring space, from grunting around fires to communicating instantly across the globe. Maybe this rapid acceleration isn't just cultural evolution, but the beginning of a biological transformation that will make our current form seem as primitive as our cave-dwelling ancestors appear to us. The 12-strand theorists suggest that we're in the early stages of becoming Homo luminis, a light-based species that operates primarily through consciousness rather than physical matter. While this sounds like science fiction, quantum physics is revealing that matter and energy are fundamentally the same thing, and that consciousness might be the underlying fabric of reality itself. Children being born today seem to have capabilities that previous generations lacked. They adapt to technology intuitively, display emotional intelligence beyond their years, and often report experiences that sound suspiciously like the abilities attributed to activated DNA strands. Maybe evolution isn't waiting for random mutations, maybe it's responding to conscious intention. Here's something that'll make you wonder about the future. Artificial intelligence is advancing exponentially, and some researchers predict that we'll achieve artificial general intelligence within the next few decades. But what if human consciousness is also evolving exponentially, and we're in a race between technological and biological transcendence? The concept of the technological singularity, the point where AI surpasses human intelligence, assumes that consciousness is purely computational. But if consciousness is fundamental to the universe, as many quantum physicists now suggest, then human evolution might take a very different path than our machines. Ancient prophecies from cultures worldwide speak of a coming age of enlightenment, when humanity will transcend its current limitations and remember its divine nature. Historians still argue whether these prophecies represent wishful thinking or genuine insights into humanity's evolutionary destiny. But the consistency across unconnected cultures is remarkable. Asterisk, your body feels weightless now, floating in an ocean of infinite possibility, and your breath moves like gentle waves on a cosmic shore. As we near the end of this journey through the mysteries of your genetic heritage, let's rest in the profound implications of what we've explored together. Whether the 12-strand DNA theory represents literal biological truth or metaphorical wisdom about human potential, it points to something beautiful and hopeful. The idea that you are far more than you've been taught to believe. Every cell in your body carries the memory of stars, the wisdom of ancestors, and the potential for transformation that transcends current understanding. In this quiet moment, as your consciousness drifts between the worlds of science and spirit, fact and possibility, you might sense something stirring in the depths of your being. Not necessarily the activation of mystical DNA strands, but perhaps something even more profound, the recognition that mystery itself is sacred, that not everything needs to be proven to be meaningful, and that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any theory can capture. Your breathing deepens, and with each exhale, you release the need to know everything, to categorize every experience, to reduce the magnificent complexity of existence to simple explanations. Maybe the real activation isn't about unlocking hidden genetic codes, but about opening to the infinite mystery that you already are. The night wraps around you like a gentle embrace, and somewhere in the quantum foam of your cells, in the spaces between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, something ancient and eternal whispers, "You are enough. You are whole. You are exactly where you need to be in this moment of cosmic becoming." As sleep approaches on silent feet, carrying you toward dreams that might be memories of other dimensions, other possibilities, other versions of yourself living in parallel streams of consciousness. Know that whether your DNA has 2 strands, or 12, or infinite spirals of light, you are a miracle walking through a universe of miracles. And that is more than enough for tonight. Rest now, cosmic traveler, and let the mysteries of your genetic heritage unfold in the gentle theater of dreams, where all possibilities exist simultaneously, and every ending is also a beginning.